We're recording. Hey, Michael.
Hello.
We had so much fun talking last time, and we kind of kept it broad. And I don't know about you, but I looked at it and thought, hey, this was good, but we should stay focused on one topic. And so for our topic this time, we said that we're going to do kind of looking at schools in the era of the coronavirus, from what they have done to what we're doing now, to a little bit to what we think they're going to do in the future. So in our last conversation, I said something that I still believe, and as always, to the powers that be up there, schools, I'm not criticizing my district. I'm just saying I think this is something we should have reconsidered. And it is that I don't think we should have closed the schools, or at least I think we should have given it more thought. And here is my argument. Public schools are responsible for the well-being of all children. And at the moment that somebody said close down the schools, whoever it was, I don't think anybody, and I'm not faulting anybody because it's hard to do this when the media is screaming for a shutdown, but I don't think anybody said, well, hang on, is closing the schools the best thing to do for kids? Now, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't then say, okay, yes, but it is the right thing to do, period. You know what I'm saying? It could be, yeah, it's not good for kids. We should do X, Y, and Z, but in the overall interest of society, we should close down the schools. In other words, I'm not saying that you might not have gotten to close down the schools, but at no point did anybody stop and think that I can see, hey, wait a minute, you know, it's closing up. This is a disease that does not hit children very much. There certainly are children living with older people or vulnerable people, and that is an issue, and we definitely need to kind of think about that. But when you take away when you consider all the things that schools function as, and not just for our poorest children, for all segments of society, what schools represent, we're taking away a big chunk of the life of kids 6 through 18, to say nothing of then college, 18 and on. And we're doing it without a whole lot of knowledge that it's going to help things. Should we do it? And again, I think that I personally would have been satisfied if I'd seen some sort of thought into that question, and I had not. Did you see any kind of consideration of that question?
I mean, kids are a segment of society, and every segment of society that's been shut down has suffered. So I'm not looking for, I didn't see a specific analysis towards young people for which is, I think, what you're asking for, right?
Kind of, except
or more generally the cost of shutting down school.
But I mean,
there was, because in New York City there was tons of the mayor shut down. What I saw in New York City was the mayor de Blasio was slow to shut down school.
Yeah, I would argue that in New York there was such a discussion. I agree, but
right, and there was an extensive discussion where the media, essentially, what I saw was more or less initially taking the side of de Blasio, kind of like a social justice argument that shutting down schools would produce both inequities in schooling, and also there wasn't research showing that it would help. And then very quickly there was
an
outcry from expert public health folks. And then I saw the media tide turn.
We'll see, yeah.
And then very quickly.
Well, first off, I want to be specific at what I said. I said, no one in the field of education. So you said, well, it'll hurt every segment of society. I agree, but we have one whole institution that is in loco parentis for our nation's children, which is public schools. And I kind of think it's their job to bring that up. And what I'm saying is that, that in this particular case, the people responsible, namely schools, and as I said, de Blasio did this. My understanding of what he did not get any support. And there's no question that at the time the schools shut down, and for several weeks afterwards, the CDC clearly said, we don't see any benefit from schools shutting down. They first said, we don't see any, and it could make it worse. And then it said, well, if you close down for a long time, maybe it'll help with social distancing, but don't just close down for 2 weeks, which is what everybody said. But what I'm saying is I'm not necessarily looking for society to have that discussion, because you're right, from a social standpoint, every businesses got shut down, every other part of it. But I'm talking about, we spend a lot of money on education. And one of the things that education is supposed to do not, and I conservatives tend to get very upset, like, we're not parents. No, we're not parents, but it is kind of our job, I think, to say, hey, to hold on a minute and say, it's our job to focus on the students. And you are talking about doing something that's never been done before. This isn't, snow day. You're talking about closing down schools and either not educating kids or educating kids in a way that we've never done before. And all I'm saying is that nobody had that discussion, and except de Blasio. I agree he did. And from my view, he was pretty badly castigated for it. And to this day,
not initially. I don't think initially. I think initially you saw a lot of, pieces in the New York Times stuff being like, well, it's complicated. Nobody, there were. I'm not sure who you're looking for. If you're looking for like the media to have been talking about it, I think you can find pieces in the case of New York where people were saying there are costs. This is complicated. There's a lot of uncertainty here. I think if you're looking for, yes, let me put it to you. Who are you looking for?
No,
I think there was that consideration in some
I didn't see it, but let's say I grant you it. What you're saying, what there's no question, and I think everybody agrees on, is that eventually it became this huge push for de Blasio to close the schools. And on top of that, to this day, he's kind of held responsible, or like he's one of the people who, quote, dragged his feet about doing things. And he's held out in that regard. And all I'm saying is, and by the way, de Blasio didn't do it really from a meta. He was really talking about the high poverty rate, New York City's many low-income kids and how they would be hurt, which is totally appropriate, don't get me wrong, and I think that's what a mayor should focus on. So all I'm saying is that never happened. And then, so that's what we did.
Wait, what never happened?
The whole broad, nobody ever said, whoa, wait a minute, you're planning on closing down the schools for...
You mean outside of New York, or...
Outside, period, yeah, I'm saying nobody, that was never even raised as an issue. What?
Well, because I'm just like, where? Because clearly it was, meaning you're wanting a broader discussion than there was.
I'm saying flat out that this is what happened in California, and I know it happened in many other places.
Yeah. Okay.
In our particular date, and I talked about this last time, March 12th, we aren't closing down schools. Night of March 12th, hey, could you come into work tomorrow at 7:30? So I can tell you something, March 13th, we're closing down schools. It was that quick. And before that point...
This escalated quickly.
And before that point, at the point at which, and by the way, most schools closed down around the same time in the middle of March. There might, maybe from the 11th
there was
through
a
the
wave
16th.
after initial kind of like, should we, shouldn't we? I don't know, there's costs. Then it like, governors suddenly got mostly on the same page about what to do. And then very quickly they started copying each other.
And the point is that beforehand, when people were talking about closing schools, nobody said, well, wait a minute. Why are we even talking about closing schools? What is the rationale for closing schools? Nobody, and I'm saying categorically, that conversation was not had. When de Blasio said, hey, I'm not closing schools, and he was the guy, I'm not a big fan of him, but he was definitely the guy who said, hey, let's, this is not good for our poorest children. And as you point, we've gone through what happened there, but I'm saying that, yeah, I think something like that should have happened. And instead we went from we'll close, and most schools will close from 2 to 3 weeks. But of course that was exactly what the CDC said wouldn't happen. And within a week, New York City was getting really bad. And so everybody's like, within the past, in early April, we're going to be close to the end of the year. And nobody has, and even to this day, closing for 2 weeks to closing to the end of the year, where's that discussion been? You know what I'm saying? Where is giving kids credit, no credit? Everybody says, well, that'll hold them harmless. No, it won't hold. I don't know if you're grading, but it's not going to hold them harmless. If you had a higher GPA than your previous one, then you are harmed by giving somebody credit, no credit. That's just a fact. And so all I'm saying is we still aren't talking about if this is a good idea. There's no talk, and nobody's talking about opening the schools before the end of the year that I know of, at least in many states. And I still don't think that is something that we should be ignoring. And that's my beef. I truly don't think we should have closed down all the schools. If we had, we should have done it in a more thoughtful and focused area. I think high school should have been the last to close, with elementary schools possibly first. I think there should be for working parents, there should be some kind of school still. I think the fact that the teachers feel uncomfortable with it is just too freaking bad, because as public schools, because we are paid by the state. We get, I mean, right now, the states, California and other states are probably going to get even further into debt paying for government worker pensions. And pretty much all government workers are home. Teachers at least are working, yay us. But we are, and I mean, so are others. I don't want to make it sound like it's only teachers, but we should be, if it's deemed that we can, you know, go back to school, if you're not in a bad, if you don't have a particular risk factor, and it's deemed safe enough for you to go back to school, I don't think unions should be saying, well, we don't feel safe. You know, I mean, that's just kind of the thing.
So you're governor of California.
Yes.
Tomorrow, you open the schools.
Okay.
Right, correct? That's what you do.
Would I do that? No. If I were governor of California, I would say, I would call in probably some educators first, just some wonks, and say, okay, if we open schools in a week, right? If I said I wanted to do that, apart from, oh my God, have you lost your mind? What would you say to do? In other words, how would you open schools in the way to you know, to make the most sense, to test this out, to see if it's possible, to see if, you know, nothing goes wrong?
And what if those wonks come back to you? And I think this is kind of likely. I mean, my sense is that this is what wonks would tell you now. I think the wonkish types would tell you, and say they came back to you and they said, look, we don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't know. If kids are contagious, then locking up a couple hundred kids inside for many hours a day is precisely the sort of thing that would result in massive spreading of this disease.
You're forgetting one point. Hang on. What you just said, I want to grant it. What you just said, you're forgetting one big point.
Yeah.
You said if kids can spread the disease, right? Locking up 200 kids or whatever will cause the disease to spread. And all I'm saying is you missed one point, which is if any of the kids have the disease. If they, in other words, which is a key plot point, because one of the things we don't know is if kids have the disease at all. So it's worth remembering that.
I disagree. I think there is evidence that kids get the disease.
No. I know. But what I'm saying is in a particular district, I mean,
oh yeah,
I don't know anybody around here in the city of Redwood City. I think there might be 5 cases. That's what I'm saying, is that we're closing down entire schools for a whole year in places where there, you know, there's counties that aren't going to school and there's not a single COVID-19 case in their district, in their entire county. So I'm saying, let's start, when you say it's going to spread, let's don't forget that we don't know that any kid has it.
Well, sure. So if suppose, and I still think that what the wonkish types would say is like, look, we don't know. Yeah. For all we know, the following could happen. If you open schools next week, it's entirely possible that a kid will come into school sick because germs spread and germs are around. This is not controlled. We're not at a place of testing and tracing, whatever we're going to end up doing, hopefully.
Oops, you broke up. Hang on, say that. Okay, we don't know. Okay.
We don't know where the disease is at any given time yet because we don't have robust testing and we don't have the ability to trace the path of the disease. So it's entirely possible.
Stop. You're breaking up for a minute.
Oh, sorry. It's entirely possible that a kid could be sick, show up to school, and we don't know what would happen if that kid came to school, you know, coughed on everybody's math textbook for 2 hours, you know, whatever. We simply don't know. That could result in a huge epidemic. If you ask me, you know, and maybe you ask those wonkish types, okay, give me a chance to happen.
Well, you're breaking up again. Sorry.
I can just move closer.
I don't know what's causing it.
I can talk like right in real close.
No. You're just, there's something wrong with the sound every so often. And I think it is because you're not close enough, but I don't know. But it's not that I can't hear you. You're breaking up. That's what I mean.
Anyway.
No, okay. So hang on a minute, because I want to go back.
So the point is that I think that, you know, you are correct in saying there's not evidence that this helps. But I think the uncertainty there is, and the possibility that these wonkish types would tell you, there's a real chance that if you bring back school tomorrow, you'll have a disaster in a month.
It's also true that we could have that same disaster if we open Best Buy, Kohl's, and Starbucks, right? In other words, we have now, and I would go one further. I would say, okay, suppose if we open schools, we have a lot of staff who will do, for little kids, we'll do temperature checks. You know, like literally the kids walk into the classroom, there's somebody, you know, taking their temperature, and any kid who's got any kind of temperature for any reason leaves, right? And let's say we also spend extra time making sure the bathrooms are really clean, which in high school is a very big deal, trust me. I mean, we clean them once a day, we should clean them 5 times a day. So suppose we do that. Okay, so we're sending kids home if they have any kind of fever. So the only kind of kids we'll be getting, which is possible, I agree, is asymptomatic carriers. And we do that. Tell me, I would say, are you actually saying that it is worse for the children of our K through 12 kids? It's worse for them to go to school and risk what you say might be an outbreak than it is to open up the stores and also get an outbreak. Why is one deemed? I mean, we're thinking about opening retail. We're not thinking about opening schools. Why is one deemed okay and the other not?
I went to Staples today.
Isn't it exciting?
It was great. I bought 2 reams of paper, some more crayons, and I have a little like seltzer machine, so I got more CO2.
You got what was the last thing?
I spent a total of carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide
it's
machine.
Crucial
CO2.
ingredient in seltzer. Yeah, it makes delicious seltzer.
Yes.
I'm a good New York City Jew. I like seltzer. Okay, so I was there for a total of 10 minutes. I walked in. At no point did I stand, well, okay, except for the checkout person at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
I was 6 feet away from all other human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I had a mask on. I'm sorry?
Did you pick things up?
The things that I was going to purchase.
Yeah, but they could have been touched by somebody else.
They could have, yes.
Okay.
In which case I had, they had a chance to chill out or whatever. But there is a risk there. That's absolutely right. I washed my hands. I Purelled after I left the store. And I wore a mask the whole time. And 10 minutes later, I was gone. If I were at school on a typical Monday, I'd be in contact with a couple hundred children. I'd be in close for 45 minutes at a time, all breathing the same air. We're all touching the same desks. There's much more. I think it's a false comparison, basically.
No, okay, but what? Okay, so
going to a Kohl's, in terms of the
clear,
density and the seriousness of the contact.
Okay, if you go, let's do this then. So based on what you're saying, and by the way, we probably in agreement, we shouldn't have closed down the stores at all. We could just do social distancing, and we could have kept all the stores open, because you're basically saying there's no real risk at all to opening up the stores.
No, there's obviously a risk. Meaning, I think we agree on this, but just to make sure we're on the same page, the goal of social distancing is to reduce, to whatever extent possible, the number of possible factors to transfer disease. Opening some stores is obviously better than opening all stores. It's not that it's safe, it's that it's low probability for any one case, but higher probability as you open more of them. So the goal from a social perspective is to shut enough stores so that the rate of transmission is below 1. So each contagious person on average reduces, only transmits it to less than 1 person on average. So some stores, if it turns out you could open more stores, even just Staples and my grocery store and the bike store and whatever, if it turned out you could also open other stores,
I don't know what's your sound's up again.
I'm sorry, restaurants are different. The kind of social interactions you have in bars and restaurants are different. Hair salons are different than a store, right? There's more serious contact.
But then if we look at it from your perspective, and we'll take all of these things in different categories. So what you're saying is that if you want to flatten the curve, you think we could open up a little more than now, being very careful, and it will increase risk, but it won't increase risk to a level that you can tolerate. Now, suppose.
I just want to be clear about two things. There's
Okay.
my own risk tolerance.
I
and
get
then
your
there's
risk tolerance. Yes.
reducing the social risk in general so that you can get the rate of transmission below 1 on average. That's
Understood.
two totally different things.
I do. I get it. This is not you afraid to walk out of the house. You went to Staples today. You are brave. I totally, concede that point. No, and I mean, we talked about that before. I agree that this is not either of us about our personal fear. But suppose we don't have a test by August. Do you think we don't have a test? We have no way of knowing who has a disease. Are you saying that by August, end of August, we should not open the schools? Do you see my point?
I mean, that's a big question, right?
Well, no, it's the same question. In other words, right now or in August, same question. Yeah. That's kind of my point, is if it's because I guarantee you in August, with everything being exactly the same, there's going to be a whole lot more push to open up the schools than there is now.
The reason why I say it's a big question is because there's so many uncertainties at the moment, right? Back in that room where you're governor of California,
okay,
and you talk to those wonks, right now they have a lot of uncertainties, and it's possible that by August, even if we don't have tests, we'll have more certainty on what about the role
breaking
of
up,
children.
hang on.
If we knew...
You go.
All right.
If we knew.
It's possible that in August, even if we don't have tests, we'll have a lot more knowledge that would be relevant towards kind of saying, oh, we can try opening schools,
But okay, here's my thing though. Hang on. Suppose the same people who currently believe that the reason we have flattened the curve is because we close the schools, close the doors, blah, 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 the whole 9 yards. That the same people who are arguing, look, we got to keep doing it for longer. We've got it, it's down. And the minute we open it back up, there's people who literally say we can't open back up till we get a vaccine. Crazy. There's people who say we can't open up till we get a test. Not as crazy. I disagree, but not as crazy. But what I'm saying is, California has not had an outbreak. Okay, now they say, and keep in mind, there is now evidence.
Los Angeles?
Not an outbreak. We're not anywhere
like. How many deaths are there in Los Angeles?
It's not that many. I don't know. I'll look it up. But I'm sorry, we're not getting. We are way down the list on a death per million or death per 100,000. We're not even in the picture. Okay, we're not. Okay, now I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, let's look this thing up. Los Angeles.
Okay,
Los Angeles has had 663 deaths.
You think that Los Angeles? You think that's a lot? How many does New York City have? Tell me.
No, New York City has a tremendous amount. 100,000 people in New York City have died.
I believe if LA's not bigger than New York City, it's pretty close.
No, but obviously, what does the curve look like in LA?
I don't know curves. Here's my point. COVID-19 was in California in December. People died of COVID-19 on February 8th. Okay? This is new. They just started doing autopsies of old people.
No, I saw
of old deaths, old people. Sorry, of older deaths. I mean, deaths in the past to see. It's not, for whatever reason, it's not spiking here in the same way. Now, all my point is, let me finish my point, is only that if in August, it's still the same. So I have 2 points, and I think you get them both. First, if in August, California has stayed shut down all this time, and we have this same, yes, our deaths are increasing, but it's not New York City, it's not even New Orleans, okay? And it's just, and people say, well, we need to keep shut down. In August, all I'm saying is if everything is the same now and in August, identical situations, right? In other words, growth, but not an explosion, anything else. The only real thing that's different is time, and that there's going to be less tolerance for closing the schools for next year, where people are like, okay, this year's shot, forget it, we won't argue about it. And all I'm saying is that the kids, the people might not be arguing about it, but you are hurting the kids. This is not fun for kids. You've got, what, 2? You've got 2, right? You
Yeah,
know
one
it's
on
not
the
fun
way.
for them.
The one on the way is not going to be in school for a bit.
I know, but I'm talking the two you have. So all I'm saying is that this is not.
No, we hate it. Nobody
Yeah,
likes it.
I know.
Right. But what I'm saying is that August, um, besides for just people's intolerance of the situation and the harm that it's leaving families and children with, the situation in August could look quite different in ways that are more amenable to opening up schools.
Yes,
You
and
know,
all I'm
August,
saying is, and I think you agree with my point. I agree. In August, it might be, oh yeah, you know, we've got this, this, and this. We feel more comfortable. We've seen Georgia have tattoo parlors open, and they didn't,
right.
you know, come
And
across.
we know that children in Georgia get a lot of tattoos, and so I love you, Georgia.
I do love Georgia.
Disrespect Georgia. No disrespect.
You've probably never even been to Georgia.
I've been to like 3 states. So
Really? Are you serious?
No, hold on. Born in Chicago. No, sorry, wrong. I born in New York. Visited New Jersey. Grew up in Chicago. Grandparents in Massachusetts. Went to Wisconsin all the time. Went to Michigan sometimes. Been to St. Louis.
That's a
had
state.
a road trip once to Denver. That's a lot of states, but I don't know if you should count them all. Went to California once for a week. It was very nice.
North or south?
Los Angeles.
South. Okay.
South.
That's 9.
I've driven through Connecticut.
10.
I've been
That's about as. I'm sorry.
I've been to Maine.
Okay, yeah, I haven't been to Maine. Maine's what there's our Maine is. I have not been to Maine. I have not been to about 11 states.
Tennessee. That's in the south.
They have great barbecue down there. Okay,
Tennessee,
so you said you've been to 3 states. You've been to a bunch of states.
Yeah, but it's about the quality of the time there. In any event, I've never been. Yeah, never been to Georgia.
Okay.
Yeah. So right.
So my
point
is going back to our discussion is I just want to make sure I get my point, which is I agree that in one case we could be better off, but I'm also saying is that in many ways we are now. I mean, is Georgia opening schools? By the way, I forget.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I just feel that we're not discussing that point. And this is the point I made to Glenn this morning. It's a good point that I don't think people are adequately giving America's schools credit for, which is that on a frickin' dime, you know, no notice for most of us. We went home and were told teach from home. You know what I'm saying? And nothing more. And you know, there's some woman out there, Robin Lake. She's really annoying me because she said, "Oh, I've looked at the websites and here's what districts are doing because you know, people of America, if you want to know what schools are doing, do not go to district websites." You know what I mean? That's not, I don't say they're bad. This is not bad. That's just not where you go to see what's happening. And this woman is writing papers about how unprepared America's schools are because she's looking at district websites, and it's driving me crazy. But the point is, by and large, the fact that we're doing anything at all is amazing. You know?
My impression is that teachers in other countries have also been asked to do similar things.
Well, anywhere.
They're amazing also.
Yeah, that's my point, is that I don't think people are taking it way too much for granted. I mean, the CDC couldn't even figure out how to get tests done. And that's their job. Okay, that's their job. And they blew that. And they on a dime, they said, hey, guess what? Absolutely everything you know about school, every single part of your job is going to be completely different. Go get it done. And we did. And I mean, and you're right, it happened in other countries as well. And I'm saying we deserve a whole bunch of credit for that. And instead you get 13,000 suburban moms who write op-eds. For some reason, all the op-ed writers live in New York, and they're all whining about, you know, their 3 kids and having to schedule Zoom conference. I'm like, you know, shut up. I mean, you know, tell them you're homeschooling and go away. Actually homeschooling. What you're doing is not homeschooling. But it's just very irritating when they do that. Or it is worry about the poorest kids, which I worry about too. But I get a little upset. Not upset isn't the right word. It's a little inaccurate to say that the reason that your lowest income kids aren't present is because of lack of access. I'm not saying that's never the case. Sometimes they only have one laptop. That's a problem. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they're babysitting their family, also a problem. But motivation, at least at the high school level, is a big issue, and I'm not faulting it. I'm not judging them. I'm just saying, let's get real, okay?
Yeah, no, school, well, that's because, just to get away from all this coronavirus stuff for a second, the grand delusion of so many commentators on education is that school is a demotivating environment, as opposed to a magically motivating environment. That's what it actually is. The idea that you know, instead of, if you told people to study stuff on their own,
they don't.
They don't. But if you go to school, like 80% of them do.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
Yes. No, that's exactly right. I said that to Glenn today. I said, you don't understand that there's probably 10 to 20% of the kids, give or take the school, that simply because they show up at school, they are doing more thinking than they would ever willingly do on their own, not because they're bad kids, just because they're more interested in other things. And school itself and the ability to put a kid in a classroom, and of course this is what makes teachers good, the ability, I mean, if you're a teacher who works well with at-risk kids, what you do is motivate. That is your secret sauce, is to get a kid to pick up a pencil, to get a kid to ask a question. That's the secret sauce of working with at-risk kids. But the point is, when you take that away, then what do? You know, and the fact is we're doing it. And I mean, I have seen pretty much, I'm at, I think 95% of my kids, give or take, in my trig classes have now checked in and are working. And these are, you know, these are kids. I mean, I've got kids who are sitting at home all day with babysitting their brother and sister and can only check in and write things at night, or they have to do, you know, their parent, oh, look, mom's off today, so can I come on and ask these 3 questions, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just saying that it's really amazing that we're doing this. And it's, I think everybody's so busy reporting on the problems, which do exist, that they don't stop and think, you just completely blew apart everything you thought you knew about public school. And kids are getting fed, teachers are having Zoom conferences. We're doing what we can. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, and thinking about the costs of this whole thing on children, and I want to limit this now to a narrow thing, the loss of learning. One thing that makes it hard for me to evaluate the cost of the loss of learning from this whole thing, because there are costs.
Yeah.
Even if 95% of your students are checking in.
No, there's I mean, I'm not able to teach them as much content as before. Assess, right. Yeah, absolutely. No, total agree.
Way less. Me, like way less. And what I am able to teach, I have less confidence that I'm teaching it successfully. That's just the name of the game, I think.
Just can I interrupt there? I actually have the opposite senses because I'm mostly doing small group tutoring, and I can do check for understanding pretty much every time. I'm actually having the opposite, is that I've got kids that I have a much better sense of what they're doing now than I used to. Just as a happy.
95% of kids, hold on. If you had 95% of the kids checking in.
No, who are working, but they're not working in it every, no, that the reason I have them doing that is because I'm like, come to this office hour. And then I have kids that didn't come for 2 weeks and they sheepishly email. I'm like, great. And I hold, for the kids who came in late, I go back 2 weeks. I mean, I'm like basically doing small group learning for everybody and keeping everybody moving forward.
That's a gappy, confusing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a differentiator. What can I say?
Yeah, no, but it must be much less learning than if these same students were coming to the classroom. And anyway.
Yeah, as I said, if I look at where I would normally be, I'm about 2 weeks behind, but I worked slow with all my kids. Anyway, back to your point, because it was a good one, so keep going. Loss of learning.
There is going to be some loss of learning compared to a regular school year, but in trying to figure out the costs of that loss of learning, that's entirely up to schools, I think.
Yes. Well, let me go further. When I talk about the harm to students, loss of learning is not necessarily on my top 5. It would probably make 5. Okay, but that, No, I
Yeah.
mean, I think we're in agreement on that. When I read these, if Michael Petrilli, if he reposts that article one more time about we need to take all the poor kids and hold them back a year, I'm going to find him. Okay. It's like, stop it. It's,
Right.
it's like kids are losing time in the classroom. I'm like, oh, for God's sake, you don't know what the hell you're talking. I'm sorry. I'm ranting. Go.
Point. A lot of the costs, besides for loss of learning, a lot of the costs and the risks here, it's up to schools and districts to figure. If schools and districts manage this in reasonable ways, I think the costs are manageable as long as you don't do something stupid like keep kids from graduating.
Well, that's yeah. Right? Or hold kids back. I know that's what's driving me crazy.
Ways to kind of paper over this in reasonable ways so that everybody can keep chugging along. Then the costs, I think, are minimal. Yes. The risk is that schools will do stupid things, and that's scary to me.
It is, yeah. Well, it is, fortunately, and I can't stress this enough, how good news it is that we are 8 years past the heyday of education reformers. Because if this was 2012, it would be bad. You know what I mean? They had much more power over things than they do today. And I'm not one of these people who demonize education reformers, but they just view.
They are hounds.
Stop. I don't mean that. Some of my none of my best friends are, but somebody somewhere I know must be an education reformer who well, no, I drink beer with them all the time. That's not it.
Anyway, so in August. In August.
No, but my point is this, is that to go back, because I want to close up on what you're saying, and this is, I think, an important point, that if anybody's listening to this, the fact that 2 teachers are saying, no, the loss of learning is not, when I talk about the damage to kids, loss of learning is not what I'm talking about. And I am not one of those people who says, these kids lost 2 months in school. They lost 2 months of learning. Oh my God, it's not like that at all. That's not, I'm worried about things like the fact of simply this, there are kids who will be less connected from school emotionally because, getting them to come. I'm sorry?
Dropout rates.
Yes, dropout rates are going to go up. You've got kids who just came here from India or Honduras, and they were planning on going to work with their parents. And then when they got here, it turned out they had to go to school. And they're like, what are you talking about? I don't want to go to school. I have to go work to pay back our debt and pay for the house. They don't want to go to school. We're losing a lot of those kids. There are kids, as I said before, there are kids in New York City and Chicago and every big city that are probably going to get in trouble with the police on the sheer basis of the fact that they aren't being forced to go to school every day. They were going to school, now they're not. The marginal kids, there's some that would do it anyway. And all of that is, when I talk about it, that's what I'm worried about. And you're absolutely right, is that we must, for example, if there are kids who don't get credits for this year in high school, then we need to change the number of high school credits you need to graduate. That's really important. And I agree that that's what we need to do. I agree. I hope, and again, by the way, that's one of the reasons that it bothers me that nobody's thinking about kids, and that the people who are, which is the education reformers, are saying things that are just driving me crazy. Like, we need to keep all the poor kids back a year, or, I can't think who, Checker Finn. See, right now, we're not worried about the smart kids, and they're the ones that are going to go off and be doctors and, cure COVID-19.
I've heard of none of these writers.
Michael sorry.
I don't know.
What do you do? What do you do with your time other than raise kids and teach, for God's sakes? Don't you ever get any? Well, I know what you do. You read curriculum stuff. Okay, that's a good point. So for anybody's listening, Michael Petrilli is the current president of the Fordham Institute. You know who Robert Pendicio is, right? Robert Pendicio? Yes.
I had a very nice interaction with him.
You did? Have you met him?
And I read his book.
Yeah, you read How the Other Half Learns.
No, read like online.
I'm sorry?
That was a very pleasant interaction.
Oh, you did. Well, anyway.
Stuff.
Well, Robert Pendicio works for the Fordham Institute. He is a executive vice president or something, and Michael Petrilli is the president. Fordham Institute is kind of like one of the major education reform policy think tanks going. It's entirely about education. So so when I talk about education reformers, I'm talking about people who either believe in school accountability, school choice, or formatted curriculum, one of the three things. Some believe in two or three. Most of them believe in choice. Some of them are choice accountability, some of them are choice curriculum, and some of them are no, just choice, nothing else. When I'm talking about these guys, there are people who are writing articles saying we should not, and Michael Petrilli is a pretty big name he used to work in the Bush administration. He's one of the major people in education reform, and he is saying we need to hold poor kids back next year. They're losing so much learning, and then we have to teach them more, and we have to assess them, and if they haven't hit a certain level, then we're not going to let them go on, and things like that.
Yeah. What he's saying there is that the major risks are to the system that he would like to create, where learning is economically valuable, and the risk is to the reform, not to the student.
Well, not only that, they're also
in the reform, meaning the risk is that schools give up on this important structure, and therefore you would have to hold kids accountable to that structure, and then kids would suffer if you hold them accountable to that structure, and so you must help make them fit into that structure.
And the thing is,
the structure, not about the children.
And and the thing is, that's to him, to be fair to Michael Petrilli, to him it's about the kids. He sees it as that learning is this thing that we just kind of stick in you and you fill you up, and if we don't fill you up to a certain level, then you go out into the world, you suffer. I want to be clear that I don't think Michael Petrilli hates kids. He doesn't, and I think he cares about them. He just views learning as a different way than teachers do, and as a result, he sees this isn't something he's doing to the system. To him, it's something he's doing to the kids. He's saying he is doing it. Yes, you are doing it to the kids. He's doing it for the kids. But also, and I'm sure you've seen this, everybody is talking, and not teachers, and by and large, unions are too busy focusing on making sure we don't go back to work too early or something. But they're all the education reform people are basically talking about, this is a great time to implement some reform that I've always wanted. Michael Petrilli wants everybody to fail unless they hit a certain point. Checker Finn, who's a ex-president of Fordham Institute, he wants to focus on gifted kids. Robert Pendicio loves curriculum, loves government. He's saying this is a great time to have your kids read about current affairs, which I'm entirely in favor of. I just listened to a podcast with Jeb Bush today, and he's saying this is where we need to get customized kids. We need, this is showing us that we don't need to have formatted, straitjacketed school system. I'm just giving examples, and if you're listening to this is all, as I said, if you look in education reform, Fordham Institute. Another good thing is Nat Melkus's podcast. Who else? What education stuff do you read?
I don't know. If I was Jeb Bush and I had a podcast, I would name it Podcast with an exclamation point.
So anyway, my rant's over. My rant is over. Let's. So we actually have already talked about this, but we talked about. So let me tell you first. If I ruled the world, or at least California, if I were what's his name, Newsom, I would say, and then I'm going to turn this over to you to do. I would say. We're spending a ton of money. We've got a ton of people who are at home not working right now. Let's bring these people in, and first we'd have to do this thing where we separate two types of kids who are around vulnerable people, and then kids who are themselves vulnerable, and then teachers who are vulnerable. That's going to take some time. In other words, if you're a teacher who has asthma or something like that, what do we do? If you're a kid who has asthma or is undergoing chemotherapy, what do you do? These are all the things that we should be thinking about doing right now, even if we don't open for 2 or 3 months, because unless we have a test, those, even starting next August, those people are going to be at risk. We should be thinking about how to effectively keep those kids in the system and how to work with the teachers like that. Then once we establish who's able to teach and who's able to come to school, I would say come in every day, do temperature checks. I would start with high school, because high schoolers are already out there working. A lot of them are. They're already out in the system. They are motivated enough to follow instructions. I mean, you could keep them separated. You could keep your classrooms, reduce your classroom sizes, and I do that for a while and see how it ran. That's what I would do, and then go from there. If it were me, I would start running high schools in May, just to say, hey, let's come in, even a shortened day. Let's get tests out of the way. Let's come up with a way to give you grades if you want them, instead of credit, no credit. Let's try that to the end of the year, starting in May, just a 6-week, see how it goes. Because then if you close it down at the end of that 6 weeks, you've got that automatic shutdown period. If it works and everybody's okay, then you can think about summer school, and that's going to put you in position to open well in August. That is what I would do. Over to you.
I don't know what I would do. I mean, here I am in New York City. We don't even know how many people are infected with this thing. We don't understand some extraordinarily basic things about this disease. There's basic facts about who's at risk that we literally don't know. I mean, you mentioned asthma. Now there's all these murmurings that asthma is actually not showing up as a risk factor.
That was smoking that didn't show up as a risk factor. Asthma.
Asthma's
I just talked to a nurse, a nurse who's treating COVID-19, and she said asthma is a big issue. But the one I heard about was smoking, which cracked me up because I've been worried that my brother's a smoker.
Well, I think asthma. We can check this out, but I believe that asthma is not, based on what I was reading earlier, is not showing up quite as.
But you're saying we don't know who the at-risk kids are.
We don't know who the at-risk kids are. That's not stable enough, and we don't know when we're going to know. It would be nice.
But can I say something? If you're in chemotherapy, it's probably not a good idea to go to school with this virus around. If you are obese, which is going to be a tough one, by the way, probably not a good idea. That's actually going to be the tougher one to do than any. You know what I mean? That's the one, like, yeah.
So this, it's the problem with talking about doing this smarter is that we don't have the knowledge at this point, and it's not stable enough. The knowledge base is not stable enough, I think, to say, let's do this the smart way. What you can do is take risks in place where you are risk tolerant because you don't think there's major risk. I don't know what those places are right now. Maybe if it turns out weather is a big factor, maybe like the hottest place in the country. I don't know. So.
But can I say one thing?
New York City, I don't know.
So, can you agree? There's something there's something in what you're saying that just came clear to me. You want more certainty than I do. And society-wise, sure. I mean, clearly,
I don't
because
want very much, but there's not very much at all.
But what I'm saying is that I think that's a big difference, and I think that is actually a personality trait that may lead to the parents who send their kids back to school, and the parents who say, no, I want them hanging at home for a while, and we'll have Zoom session for them to do it. But wouldn't you agree that, I mean, if you look at the demonstrations and stuff like that, that some of this is about leaving out the politics, which I imagine is also some of it. Wouldn't you say that it's possible that what we're basically talking about is the people who say, yeah, I'll glove, I'll do this, I'll do that. I'm not in any one of the major risk factors, and I'm tired of this. And there's parents who are like that too, or there's parents who are working and need their kids parents are like, well, I'm getting exposed to it anyway, so does it matter if my kid gets exposed to it? And so I think that might be another way to do it, is to say, another way to open up schools is to say, look, let's get a list of the teachers who are willing to teach and the kids who are willing to come to school and see how that works. Because it may be just a matter of the difference of certainty level. Because what you're talking about, you're saying, we don't even know. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm okay with that. Let's go back. You know what I mean? That's my reaction to what you're saying. And I don't think I'm unique. And the further time goes on, and I think we can agree that 6 weeks ago, my opinion was pretty fringe. It's getting, closer and closer to, there's people saying, we can't do this forever than there was 6 weeks ago.
Well, that's because 6 weeks ago, you know, the facts have changed. I don't think that you know.
When you're saying the facts have changed, it's
Early.
like not everybody's New York City. Is that what you're saying? When you say the facts have changed?
No, the facts, they're just the things progressed. Like, 6 weeks ago, no one was saying because it was just starting. It was clear that, I think it was just as clear that you couldn't do this indefinitely. I think that was always clear.
I'm not sure. I'm not.
Well, in any event, you asked me about what I would do if I were governor.
Yeah, and you kept on going, we need certainty, we need certainty. Tell me what you would do.
Well, that's because I believe that you can't really make a decision about the fall right now. I don't think you can make a decision about August right now. I don't definitely, if you're asking about right now, like literally right now, like would I open the schools before the end of the year? De Blasio went out and said, no, we're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. Cuomo was like, well, Cuomo was, I think, just taking pot shots at de Blasio.
Yeah.
but I understand that also, because if it turned out 2 weeks from now that New York City, this isn't going to happen, okay? But if there was like 50% of the city turned out to have been infected,
the asymptomatic carriers, what you're saying.
I don't think the ranges that Cuomo said 10% today, and I think he's trying to lowball it. And I've seen some other people say, just based on the number of deaths we've had and putting a bunch of other things together, maybe 20 or even 30% of people in the city mm-hmm. have had it. So, but that's going to vary based on neighborhood and stuff. Anyway, point is that, I can imagine situations where the facts change dramatically enough that by June you're saying something different than you are right now.
Well,
I really do think that there's something to be said for just wait right now. I literally read an article today that reversed, our whole understanding of this pandemic based on this autopsy thing that you mentioned.
Maybe the California thing, you mean?
Yeah. Maybe we should just wait 5 minutes. And I know that it's a painful 5 minutes, but we should wait before talking about. Now, if you want to ask me how I would do it.
No, I am. How would you do it? Whenever you do it, how would you do it?
Whenever clarity hits.
When you have reached you have attained the relevant knowledge level, right?
Yeah. It's hard. I was reading an article in the New York Times where it was talking about some place in it was the Danes, wasn't it? The Danes.
The Denmark's opening their schools and stuff, yeah.
They've got kids sitting they basically are doing social distancing within schools. That wouldn't work. That wouldn't work here.
It wouldn't?
No, not in the city. It's just too crowded.
Oh, got it.
Right?
But you don't think in terms of an initial pass-through with all the kids whose parents are going to go, no, my kid's staying home and everything else, you don't think it would be possible?
I think that you could start by saying, let's have a per capita per square foot number for each school. So we can say first graders come in on Monday mm-hmm. or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that in terms of making whatever other distance stuff work, any amount of face-to-face time would improve things dramatically.
I'd be open to that, saying have a reduced day, but more, and reduced class size. Of course, teachers are always pushing for smaller class size, except me.
I'd rather have less stuff to do. But I think that kind of a slower start where you can monitor it and see how it's going and see if it leads to huge problems, especially during flu season. I think there's lots of public health reasons why you want to have schools if you can. If we're going to talk about vaccinating everybody and there's going to be a lot of just education in general in the fall and winter about how to live in appropriate ways. Schools could be a resource if it's safe to go there. Mm-hmm. And if there's going to be any opening of the economy beyond what there currently is, you'll need more people in school. I don't think that would make a dramatic difference in the economy, honestly. But any little bit helps. So I'd be looking for ways of doing things slower. I'd also, in the meantime, want to give a shout out to the possibility that outdoors could be much safer than indoors. And
Yeah.
obviously, you can't do that forever. And you can't do as much learning outdoors, period.
Yeah.
But if it is safe to be outdoors, we could have perhaps outdoors time or outdoors days that is
Mm-hmm.
wildly expanded relative to what you do in the school year. Have recess
Yeah.
for more time, with check-ins and snack, for younger kids or whatever. If it turns out that which I think we'll find, that being outdoors is dramatically safer than being indoors.
Well, I don't think we're in as much disagreement as you think, with the understanding of when we would start this. But I would start what you're saying earlier rather than later. But other
Yeah,
than
I'd be
that,
fine
yeah.
if states that are way past their peak and have hit some kind of landmark where they've been whatever. I'm no expert. New York City has set their own landmarks for safety. But if there's some predetermined level of safety, not Georgia's like, well, the cases are still going up, but about time.
I kind of like that myself. I think, because remember, DeSantis, everybody told DeSantis in Florida that the spring break was going to, and it didn't,
You take your risk, you roll your dice.
Yeah.
If you're willing to do that, if your voters are willing to live with that, to me, it's an intolerable risk. But, whatever, it's a risk. But take that risk if your voters or citizens are happy
Mm-hmm.
with that, and if you're happy with that, I guess. But I wouldn't take that risk. Anywho, I'd be fine with places in May that have been mildly affected and past whatever peak and it's under control, and maybe they've bumped up test, whatever they think is going to be a level of safety to do, keep a close eye on it, open up outdoor playtime in the school.
So we could, okay, well, I mean, I would go a little further, but for elementary school, I might not.
For elementary school.
But it sounds like we could both say that it's conceivable, and again, with me way bolder than you are, it's conceivable that in May, we could do experiments with people who were willing to do this. Again, I would be less tolerant of teachers' unwillingness than you would, I'm sure, to in areas that are safe. And New York City would not be first on my list to open if it's any consolation.
It might be. I mean, it depends on what the prevalence of the infection is.
See, I think another thing that's going to show up is that it really is hitting certain populations, not for whatever reason. And I think that New York, my guess is New York's going to have problems for a while. But this was good discussion, and we're almost exactly at an hour. So, and I thought we kind of, went through the whole thing and killed it. So say again.
I got dishes to do.
Okay, well, I wanted to tell you one thing. I had my birthday. My birthday was a week ago tomorrow. Thank you. But it was positively sybaritic. I had my nails done. I don't know if you can see.
I can see them.
My nails are done. See the little flower there? My manicure.
Accent.
Say again.
That's an accent. That's an accent.
Yes, it is. It is. And then my brother and I went and had sushi at a restaurant.
Inside, sitting down.
It was my favorite sushi bar, and I go there all the time. And I'm like the Norm. Did you ever see Cheers when you were a kid? And Norm walks in and they all go Norm. But when I walk into my sushi bar, they all go Teacher, and he only serves his regular customers. I'm sure it's wildly against the law, as I'm sure that my nails are. But nonetheless, it was just a day of tremendous thing, and it was really fun. And now you have to wear a mask everywhere or you get a ticket in my county. So I'm worried that that's my last. Yeah. In our county, California has been generally reasonable at the state level, but there's about 6 Bay Area counties that have basically said you have to wear a mask. And here's what's interesting about it is I would argue that proves that California, at least the Bay Area, is not terribly happy about the shutdown, because the counties are the only reason. Why would a county make you wear a mask when there's not a huge outbreak? It's probably because most of us aren't wearing masks. So that.
I mean, I don't know. From my perspective, California is like a whole different culture with lots of things that make zero sense to me.
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, part of it is just spread out, you know, I mean, so we can talk about that another time since we're at an hour.
Yeah.
This was really fun. I thought we stayed focused.
Yeah.
We have fixed all the problems with public schools. And you have a good evening. Go do the dishes. I'm going to go make dinner. Have a great day. Stop recording. Yep. What? Did it stop? Hang on.